Hello, and welcome to the Innovia Conversation. I'm Steve Waltz.
And I'm Jeff Brgalski.
And Jeff, today's a podcast I've been looking forward to. We've been talking about this for a while, but a lot of questions that come up about Microsoft Great Plains GP and thinking about going to Microsoft BC. There's a lot of two-letter words we're talking about, right? So
yep, it sounds like we need someone smarter than us to help cover this topic.
And nice, and we have one of our own consultants. We have Natalie Johnson with us. Natalie, welcome.
Hi, guys. Thanks. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And as we were talking with her earlier, she's based up in Minnesota. I go, okay, that's the Great Plains breeding ground, isn't it? For close to Fargo and stuff. But what we'd love to do is hear about yourself, a little bit about your background, and what kind of led you to Innovia.
Yeah, sure. So I started consulting work about 5 years ago, back in 2017, with another Microsoft partner. At the time, they were strictly a GP partner. So that is where I began kind of my consulting journey, learning GP, learning the consulting world, things like that. They quickly noticed the direction that Microsoft was going was towards the BC world. And that is when they started looking at NAV and Business Central. So they ended up acquiring a company that was a NAV partner, and then also internally switched to Business Central the minute it came out. So back in 2018, we started learning everything about it, almost kind of like an end user. Did a lot of research because there wasn't a lot of information out there at the time. Your learning documents weren't there, things like that. And then started talking to the GP customers about Business Central and the great things about Business Central. So then we started doing implementations, migrations, and working on projects. Got a lot of BC clients then rolling in, and I ended up getting quite a bit of experience there, but happened to hear about Innovia and saw how great they were with the Business Central NAV world, and really wanted to set my focus on Business Central and NAV. So that's why I decided to take the leap and join Innovia back in February. So I'm relatively new to the Innovia family, but it's been great, and I'm very glad to be here.
Well, that's exciting to hear. And so a question I've always had, and just wondering, was it a hard transition looking at working with Great Plains and how they set up their software and run it, in that ecosystem, to come over to a completely different ecosystem such as Business Central NAV? How big was that? A big challenge for you, or how did that go for you?
Yeah, it was at first. Kind of like I mentioned back then when it first came out, there wasn't a lot of information out there on Business Central, and the NAV clients is very similar to NAV, so they might not have had that big of a drastic change. Where GP, you're completely changing systems. You're going from this is what you're used to something that looks different and functions differently. And so it was a lot of learning kind of the freedoms of Business Central, to be honest. GP has a very different structure. And so there's not a whole lot of things, modifications, customizations, things like that you can do in GP. And then to come to Business Central, and it was like, oh my gosh, we have the freedom to do all of this ourselves. And so even though there was a lot to learn, it was a really great learning experience. And now today, there's a lot of information out there on Business Central and Microsoft's, learning documentation and things like that. So at this point, I think the switch would be easier to do it. Back then, it was a little bit rougher, but now going forward, there's so much information that it's a different system, it's a different feel, it's a different look. But once you get in there, it's I turned into a BC lover. I was like, anybody that talks to me about GP, I'm like, it's a great system, and it does great things, and there are certain things that it, in my opinion, does better than Business Central. And I'm sure everybody that knows GP versus BC would say that. But overall, the functionality, the things you can do in Business Central are more superior than Great Plains. So that would be my take on kind of the transition. It was rough, but we got there. It's come a long way since then with the documentation. And once you get there, it's a great, great change for sure.
One more question I have before I turn it over to my amazing partner is so you worked with some GP clients, and it sounds like you actually moved them over to Business Central.
Yes.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that process went. I mean, did you have people that were completely scared because they were so, they were so heavy into GP and they made that leap, or how did that all work out?
Yeah, I do think a lot of GP clients are scared to move. I mean, it's a big deal. You're switching systems. It's a lot to learn. It's a lot of time from you, from your staff. And so that initial, reaction is, I think they're a little bit scared, a little bit nervous. But it's not as hard as I think it has to be. I know we'll talk a little bit later, but, Microsoft created a tool to help migrate GP clients to VC. So, some GP customers are like, I like my system. I don't want to go to a different system. I like my chart of accounts. I like my customer structure. I like all this stuff. When I go to this new system, it's all going to change. Everything's going to change. And it's like, it's not like that. It really isn't. And so I think if you find a partner that can help you understand, you have the option to change. Maybe you don't like certain things. Yeah, we can change this. But if everything's working great, but you want to kind of keep rolling, and you want to take the leap, go to Business Central, here's how easy it can be. And, I think to lean on a partner's perspective of what things do we have to change? What things do we have to relearn? Because there's obviously differences between the two systems. And so to be able to go to them, say, what are the differences? Okay, so this is what we need to focus on, but these are the things I love. And then I think it can be a pretty simple transition from GP to BC.
Interesting. I'm going to ask a question. So you've moved customers from GP to BC. Have you worked any projects where you moved customers from NAV to BC?
No, I have been a supporting person where I've helped with certain things like that. But as far as, being like the main lead consultant that's done the work or the majority of the work, I have not done that. No.
Okay. I'm just, the reason I'm asking is because I think that it looks like with some of the tools that Microsoft has specific to GP migrations, I don't see the same tools on the NAV side, which is sort of strange. And so I wondered, just like from a budget perspective, what do these projects look like moving someone from GP compared to moving someone from NAV? And my guess would be that maybe the GP project could be done more efficiently, but I'm just a member of the sales team, so I don't really know any of those. I don't really know any of those. I just ask a question.
Yeah. No, I get that. No, I don't know exactly if they have. I do know that the migration tool does work with certain instances of BC, but I don't believe it works for NAV. So if you are on like an older version of BC, you could use a migration tool that Microsoft has to migrate to like the most recent version, things like that. So, yeah.
So Jeff, I thought Microsoft had a tool for NAV 2018. Was it the Intelligent Edge? Is that what they called it, to migrate up to the cloud for BC? Or am I not thinking about that?
The Intelligent Cloud Migration? Is that what it is?
Yes, because I remember that when Microsoft, I'm thinking back when this was 2018 when Microsoft was talking to us. I know they said they had a migration tool for GP in 2018. Like chart of accounts and things like that, but I also thought they had it for NAV. So
they probably do. You are. You guys have a job now.
Yes, Steve. So right, there is a tool that I remember when we did our very first, and I won't mention the customer's name, but we did our first migration from an on-prem NAV instance to BC Cloud. And I'll just say that the tool wasn't quite ready for prime time, but the sort of the same way that Microsoft has embedded technology like into their server operating systems that right in the server OS itself, it replicates. It's made to replicate stuff to Azure. That it seems like they would probably do that for their ERP customers as well. But the tool set that they have is just different. Reading up on what's possible for GP. Using. It appears that you can put a whole copy of your old GP database into Azure and have access to, do you see like you have full access to historical transactions in that world?
So
Like,
what that
just
is that's the Azure Data Lake. And so that's what they suggest doing. So it's to limit the amount of data that comes into Business Central, because you don't need all of your historical data in your system
What?
clogging up.
How about 7 years of transactions?
Right.
Listeners, cover your ears. No, I mean that is actually when I'm in sales meetings with new customers that and they're coming from QuickBooks, or that idea that they let go of some of that old data. We're probably just going to bring over the master records and opening balances, like that shocks them and takes a little bit of time to get them comfortable with it. But I love that idea of keeping it like in something like a cost-effective cloud storage solution like Azure, and then having access to it, but not bringing all that stuff in.
Mm-hmm. I think people feel more comfortable with that too, because, like you said, like they're shocked, like, but what if I have to reference back 5 years on this invoice for whatever reason? I can't go back and look at it. Well, if you have it there, it's here, but it's not in your system. It's just here, and so it's definitely a nice alternative to having to bring in all of the data, for sure.
And I think what we do a little bit different at Innova is we have those conversations, because a lot of partners, that's hundreds and hundreds of hours. We'll move all those records over for you. But how often do you access it? And a lot of times you just need it for for a couple of years or for whatever. But that's interesting. And so when you migrate that data over, like, I mean, you've worked in the GP world, and you're thinking like master records and trial balances and chart of accounts. Is that a big deal to move a chart of accounts over from GP to BC? I was always wondering if that was a big deal. Is it pretty simple?
It is pretty simple. So there's the main difference between your chart of accounts in GP versus BC is your segments versus dimensions. And that is something that somebody that's used to GP has to just kind of try to understand it in a way of, you no longer have an account number for every single mix of, your segments, because you have a 00-001-2000. So you've got your department and your division and your main account. And so in GP, you have to have a separate account for every single one of your 01-00-2000, And so they're used to these huge, big, long chart of accounts, because you have to have all these. In Business Central, the great thing about dimensions is it lets you reduce that chart of accounts to only your main account numbers. So you can decrease, like in half sometimes, because you have all of these different numbers that make up your division and your department. So you decrease the chart of accounts. And then what happens is when you bring it over, all of your segments that you're used to seeing in GP turn into your dimensions. So if you use the migration tool, it allows you to pick your 2 global dimensions. You can pick those 2 that you want to see on all those pages and have those. It'll automatically bring them in based off of the segments that you have listed in GP. And then any other segments that you have, because some GP clients have 5, 6, 7 segments. Any of the other ones will then be your shortcut dimensions 3 through 8 when you bring them over. So to bring them over is not necessarily tough. It's more of the restructuring of understanding how your chart of accounts in GP is a little bit different than how you're going to see it in Business Central, and then to take those segments and actually turn them into your dimensions.
You just made that sound easy. It's sounding, and that's great to hear, because these are questions that we get. We're starting to get calls, Natalie, more so on people that are because a lot of what we deal with are people that are currently running NAV. Okay, I'm thinking about the cloud or BC, but now we're starting to get calls and referrals from folks that are on BC wanting to come over. So I think it's good for us to learn a little bit more. I mean, we're digging more into that, right? Because I think there's, at one point, wasn't there over 60,000 clients running GP in North America? I mean, it was a big number. And so if the roadmap is saying that we're really not going to put you in the cloud and do certain, besides a couple, updates, and I'm not an expert on the path for GP, but I just know when we go to Microsoft events, it does seem like it's the topic it's being discussed a lot. So I'm a person that try to read the writing on the wall. So, but I'm sure it's scary if you're running the software and you're thinking about what's my option. But one thing, and Jeff's one of our licensing experts, is that I didn't know until a couple of years ago. If let's say you bought Grain Plains licenses, and no matter what version of the Dynamics family you purchased licenses for, you bought AX, you bought NAV, you bought GP, whatever you spent, and if you're current on your annual enhancement, you can actually take those licenses and move over to Business Central and use that dollar amount. Am I right on that, Jeff? Close?
Tell me more, Steve. Tell me more. I love it.
I'm trying to take the thunder from our licensing expert, but that's who I learned it from. So did I learn okay?
Yes, you are correct. And that I think is just another way that Microsoft offers flexibility. The old Microsoft, a lot of IT people didn't like. It was, a lot of proprietary closed systems that whether it was on the licensing side or on the development side, access to code, is in the past several years, they've obviously been modernizing the platform. And I think the fact that they give people an option. I mean, we've had customers come from GP and go to either NAV or BC. We've had customers that have gone from AX and stepped down right size to NAV or BC. So it's good that Microsoft gives those options. And you're exactly correct. If you're a customer who's current on your GP maintenance and you want to move to Business Central, you can essentially do that without incurring any extra costs, potentially just paying what you have been paying and converting those licenses to heavily discounted subscriptions in the cloud. Much
better than what I was describing.
I think we both said the same thing.
All right, we won't put Natalie on the fence to say all right, but yeah, Jeff did it. It's good to have Jeff on these calls, right? So as I tell our listeners, he's got about how many more certifications than me now, Jeff? Are you up to 80 yet?
No, I think I'm stalled at 24.
All right, 24.
That's it?
I'm going to get one now before I retire. So that's
we are going to get Steve a Microsoft certification.
I gotta find what the easiest one is, but that's another topic. Anyway,
the easiest one is licensing, actually, Steve.
Oh, that's not easy. I mean, we make it sound easy, but that's one thing I've learned coming over from healthcare channel to the ERP world. Everything has a license in it. If it's not all connected correctly, and then I'm trying. What is the word, Jeff, that we use to make sure provisioned correctly and connected to ISVs correctly, then we get calls from our clients. That's why we have Jeff back there and Donovan as our licensing experts. So now that you've been here focused on Business Central, mm-hmm. and kind of, I'm sure you still have you get people calling you from your past saying, can you help me on this? Because you have expertise in it, right? Because when you came to Innovia, all the consultants that were at Innovia really only have worked with one system, mm-hmm. right? So I think that kind of helps you. I know you're doing an implementation right now with a client that came over that's on AX.
Yep.
And so now you kind of have exposure to 3 different ERP systems.
Yeah. It's kind of nice. And, there are those clients out there that were very bummed, to leave and are always looking like, well, if I need questions down the road, can I look you up? And so, it's been different. And it's been interesting at Innovia because I say that I have knowledge of GP and it's like, everybody's like, what? Like, what? And it's like, can we talk to you? That's,
can we put you on a podcast?
How did I end up here? I think Joe found out last week that I knew about GP when I was doing my bio, and all of a sudden he was like, "What? We need to talk to you." And so it's kind of fun because, to be honest, a lot of people at Innovia have a lot more knowledge than I do of NAV, and especially NAV, but even BC. I've learned so much in the last few months that I've been here. The knowledge is exponential. Everybody is willing to help. Any questions you have, people are jumping on calls with me if I've got some scenarios that I'm not sure about, I haven't worked on in the past, and it's like at Innovia, there's always somebody that they're, if I go to one person, they're like, I don't know, but this person will, and you can call that person up and talk to them. And so it's been awesome, the amount of knowledge, even in the short time that I've been here, about BC that I've learned. But it is fun to be one of the people that people can come to ask questions to, because nobody else, I think Andre has knowledge of GP2 and has worked, when we were chatting last week about it, he's been in there too. But to be able to be a resource to people and to clients, or if people are calling and asking questions, come and ask me questions. I'm always available, and I might not know all of them, but I do have quite a bit of experience in it. And so I'm more than happy to help where I can. So.
And we appreciate that. So if I'm a listener and I'm on Great Plains and I'm thinking about a move to Business Central, what advice would you want to tell somebody to maybe help prepare or help calm their nerves on a migration?
Yeah, I think for me, if they're thinking about moving to it, have they seen it? Because in my experience, people in GP, once they see it, it's like, what? GP is a very black box system. It's there's, like I said before, the personalizations, customizations, they're not there. But even just the very modern interface of Business Central is appealing to GP clients, because GP is not a modern interface. It just is not. It looks like it was developed in the 90s, and it's not changed, and it really hasn't. And so if they can see it, it's almost like they get excited about it, because you can see how this is bringing me up to the next level. This is the new thing. This is the greatest thing out there right now for, mid-market ERP. This is what I need. And then to be able to see a demo of it, of this is the stuff you can do. It's amazing. People are amazed at the stuff you can do. I mean, finance people edit and open in Excel, changes their life in Business Central. I'm telling you, it's like, what do you mean you can do this? You can't do any of this stuff in GP. So I would say, look it up, contact a partner. If you don't have one, contact us and get a demo of Business Central, check it out, see what it's all about. And then talk to somebody about the things you like about your ERP system. What's great about GP? And we can talk to you about, you love this. This is why Business Central is better. Or there's certain things in GP people aren't excited about in Business Central. Smart lists, huge problem with GP people love smart lists and navigation lists. Business Central doesn't have that, but they have the availability to save filtered lists, which is essentially the same thing. It's just not all in one area, and so there's different things that I think some GP people are hearing, well, they don't have smart lists and there's not management reporter for our reporting tools. Well, yeah, you're right. There's not, but contact a partner, talk to them about the things you love about GP, the things you don't want to lose, and then actually see that there's probably an alternative or ISV. PopDoc for smart lists, that's what they're kind of doing. And Jet Reports, can do a lot for people that like management reporter. And so there's other things out there. And so it doesn't have to be a scary transition. Even if you're used to certain things in GP, chances are there's probably a solution in BC too.
Nice. Jeff's going, more demos for Jeff. He's our demo guy, by the way.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, good.
I'm not.
Sorry,
just
Jeff.
That's great. I like demos. And I've got what Steve talked about, people reaching out to you asking like, hey, can I ask questions? I have identical twin daughters who are 24, graduated a couple of years ago. And so my daughter Chloe is majored in supply chain, and she worked at a business that ran GP while she was going to school, and she was an AP clerk. And then she graduated and then transferred to a bigger company that was running AX, and she's a supply chain analyst there. And so she would ask me questions. She's like, Dad, this, and I would never be able to help her because she's like, it's Microsoft Dynamics. And I said, I know, but they're different. And So now it comes down
Yeah.
to she just like, texts me with like, it used to be texting me asking me for money. Now it's like, Dad, can you help tell me why this Power BI report won't refresh? And I'm like, for $250 an hour, I won't even make you prepay. I'll be happy to take a look at it. But in all seriousness, I think there's certainly Microsoft. I think switching maybe their marketing and going to essentially now two solutions in the cloud. I mean, finance and operations, F&O, or Business Central, BC. From, what was it, like 4 different? Was there SL, AX, GP, and NAV? I'm probably missing one there. But one last question I guess I had as far as GP goes is the ISV world as robust in GP as it is in NAV and BC?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, it's not. So the Business Central has a lot more ISVs out there, and the extension, to go to the extension marketplace and see all of the extensions that you have available in Business Central, there's nothing like that in GP, and there were ISVs that we had used, we used Smart Connect for a lot of integration tools because there wasn't anything like that for GP. There's McCorma for check printing and SalesPad for entering information. That way, I think is now Cavallo, I think, bought them out. But anyway, there's still a handful of ISVs, but there's not nearly as many as there is in Business Central, or even the options. Like there's not there. It's a lot of development work and a lot of paying your partner to help you achieve what you want, and so you have a lot more freedom in Business Central and be able to do things yourself. Not that we don't want you to need us, but you don't need us as much because you can do a lot of this stuff yourself. So, and that's what's great about it too, is having that freedom.
Yeah, I think that would be reassuring to any GP customer right now that there are going to be some bonuses, even things that you don't anticipate. Like it seems, certainly over the years, Business Central has grown from what NAV was and the flexibility, the ability to develop in that environment without needing to buy $30,000 of development granules and all those. It's just so. I always say, I guess, during demos that this system is empowering for end users. It's not this, and as partners, then that allows us to sort of help think more strategically along with our customers, doing less development work and more advising and consulting. But my last question is, does GP have a CRM aspect to it or not? And that's only, I'm just saying that because we have to mention CRM at least once every episode, or Steve weeps after the recording ends. Now, and especially I tell everyone that BBC is Microsoft's only ERP application that includes customer relationship management. But I just want to make sure that I'm going to ask an expert.
Yes, you are correct. The GP does not have that in their system. So that is definitely a benefit in Business Central for sure, that they have that system that people can utilize. But no, GP does not have it, Jeff. So you are correct.
All right, Steve. So we haven't been lying all these years.
Well, what's nice is that she was talking about the segments in GP where we have the marketing segments. And
oh yeah, I was thinking. I saw you starting to get like excited there. Segments, I know. Different segments.
Squirrel.
Different segments.
Oh, it just wouldn't be a podcast without that. So, it's in the whole ecosystem. Jeff does a lot of demos, and I've been on some demos with Jeff. And as you were kind of talking about this older, antiquated, 1990s look, Business Central, they named it for that reason, is that, you can integrate Office 365 in it. And Power BI, actually, one of our consultants reached out to us today about a license for Power Automate. And I asked Jeff, I didn't know there was a separate license for Power Automate. I guess I could have Googled it and found out. But there's a license for that. And it was interesting to see how, how you can tie this all in together. And we have people, like you said, like, I didn't know that, but I knew I had Jeff, who's a licensing expert, to make sure I wasn't talking about the wrong licensing. But it's really neat to see all this all automates, and, you know, like the relationship management side of it, or just taking care of your customer side of it, to work in your email and Office 365 and Outlook and Transact. I mean, how cool is that? Especially for like salespeople, you know, you just want to keep it as simple as you possibly can, but everybody likes that. Just, you know, you could work out of there. And, you know, what's really cool and what we're going to be learning more as a team here is Teams. How you can actually work Business Central in Teams. And that's just, to me, it's like, wow. It doesn't get you, I mean, a glimpse of things to come versus the, you know, and I guess that's another, we ought to have a podcast on change management, Jeff, but I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Everybody loves change. All three of them there.
That's about it too. Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 4, you know. So.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Well, Natalie, anything else you'd like to add before we sign off here?
No, I'm excited to be in the BC world. But coming from GP, like I said, I'm open for questions. If anybody's listening that's in the GP world and wants more information, or, you know, you guys have questions, you guys hear of somebody, reach out and I would be glad to help. You know, like I said, some people are going to like GP better. That's just the way it is. And there's certain things that GP does better. But that's probably another podcast later on that you could get into the differences between the two systems and the things that GP does have that just doesn't have, you know, human resources and payroll functionality in Business Central. It's just not really there. And so people that are used to using GP for those things, you know, they might look at it and go, this doesn't do what we need. Well, once again, we've got integrity data, or, you know, another ISP that does all the stuff that you need. We got an app for that. So don't worry. It doesn't look like it has it, but we can make it have it. So for anybody listening, don't be afraid of Business Central. It is a great ERP system. I love it. And I'm here for questions or anything that anybody needs. So that's all I got.
We're not going to give out your cell phone number because
don't do that. Don't do that. Please don't.
That's right. Let the charge of the after hour rates if they do that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, we appreciate you joining the podcast. It was great to learn more about what you've done in the past and what you're doing for Innovia. We appreciate it. And for our listeners, you can find us on Innovia.com. We're heavily on LinkedIn. And Jeff, this podcast is over.